BS-Free Witchcraft is a production of the Nerd and Tie Podcast Network. Nerd and Tie produces podcasts ranging from actual play to true crime, and you can find more at nerdandtie.com or join our Discord by going to nerdandtie.com/Discord. Welcome to BS-Free Witchcraft, your monthly guide to the modern witchcraft movement, minus a lot of the usual, bullshit. I'm your host, Trey Dorn, and it is January of 2022. And, last month I talked about how I changed my topic at the last minute to, because I didn't want to talk about a super depressing topic, and how I'd probably move that topic on to January. Well, I'm moving that topic on down the line, because even though I have all the research done for it and scripted, I instead wanted to talk about something else this month. And honestly, it's all TikTok's fault. It's all TikTok's fault. Because this month on the show, we are talking about Lilith, as you probably already guessed from the episode title. And the reason why it's TikTok's fault is because probably about 5 or 6 months ago, I responded to someone and explained to them that, I shouldn't say explained to them. I said to them that I believe Lilith is not open. Like that it's not an open thing anyone can just take from, because Judaism is not an open, it's at least at best partially closed. That's the most open it is. And so, and Lilith being a figure from Jewish folklore, it's not really open for non-Jewish people to take Lilith. And I got a lot of pushback on that. And there were a lot of interesting conversations. And then some bozo decided they were going to show up in my comments and on a 5.5-month-old video and tell me about how Lilith was mad at me. They were telling me on Lilith's behalf. And that just, besides the fact that person is apparently a prophet now, and I have a whole reaction to that on my TikTok. It got me thinking that I really needed to talk about this on the podcast, because I still stand by the assessment that Lilith is not an open thing for most of us to use, right? And I want to explain my reasoning, and I want to go through the history and how we got to these concepts, and also, how maybe you don't, maybe if you think you know stuff about Lilith, maybe you don't, because I think by the end of this, you're going to agree with me that Lilith is closed. And I think you'll agree with me. And so that's what we're going to talk about. And so we're going to talk about the origins of Lilith, and we're going to talk about the origins of Lilith and the New Age movement and how it got into it. And it's going to be an interesting ride. So there's not really a good way to start this off. We always, though, have to start with I really think, and this is just really for the sake of etymology, it's important to note that in Mesopotamian mythology, there are these spirits called Lilu and Lilitu and Lilin, and that these are not singular things. In fact, Lilu is a masculine form of this concept, and it's the Akkadian word for spirit, related to the concept of Alu, which is a vengeful spirit of the Uraku that goes down to the underworld Kur, but that particular demon. But it's argued that the word Lilith in Hebrew is related to this, but the concept of Lilu and Lilitu are they're effectively demons or spirits or night spirits. Like Lilin was were night spirits that attacked men. This is a whole category of things. right? And they're not really like these are not gods. These are like lower beings, and there isn't a singular one. It is a whole category of effectively monsters. All right. It's I don't know a good way to describe it exactly in words that are kind of easily digestible there, but it is just in Mesopotamian mythology, it's a whole category of things. And we have to acknowledge these exist because it is no doubt that the word finds its way into because we're talking about the Middle East, we're talking about a general region that words cross over, and it's and so the Lilitu and Lilin and Lilu are obviously words related to Lilith, but we have to ask ourselves, how do we get from a classification of monsters and demons to a singular figure? And the singular figure is really a Jewish one. Now, and not an immediate one. So there's a single reference to Lilith in the Bible. It's Isaiah 34:14. And scholars actually disagree whether or not this refers to an evil spirit or just like a bird. It's a passage prophesizing the fate of Edom, and it talks about jackals and wildcats coming in and Lilith showing up. Well, in the King James Bible, it's an owl. It's translated as like an owl. But if we go to the Tanakh, we do see the reference to a singular Lilith here, though. And I want to be clear, I'm not Jewish. I am not a Jewish scholar. I am not an expert on Jewish folklore. I am going off of what I have read, written by much smarter people. But so in the Tanakh, we see a reference to a singular Lilith here, and that is the only reference in the Hebrew Bible to Lilith. There's no context. There's no greater thing. Now, what's interesting is that in the Dead Sea Scrolls, we don't see this as a singular Lilith. That version of the scripture, it's that version refers to Lilioth, the plural, which makes sense in context. All the animals listed in the section are plural: jackals, wildcats, Liliths. And again, some people argue that this is an owl or owls, but still, it's even if we translate this as like demons of some sort, in the older version of this passage that we have access to, it was plural. It wasn't a singular figure of Lilith. And so we have to ask ourselves, like, how do we get to the singular Lilith in Jewish folklore? Where do we see the story of Adam's first wife? How does this develop? In early rabbinic literature, Lilith does not appear in the Mishnah, but there are some references in the Babylonian Talmud and Gemara. But these are references to like a demoness or a monster. Like, they're not stories about like the Lilith figure that we've come to know. Now, there had been early references to a first Eve in the Midrash Rabbah, but that doesn't refer to the figure ever as Lilith. It's kind of a retconning the two Genesises and making it so there was a first Eve and a second Eve, like because of the conflicting stuff there. And but it wasn't ever, she wasn't called Lilith there. It's not until the 10th century CE that these ideas are combined and we get kind of the real Lilith. We get that union of the Lilith demons with the first Eve, really in the alphabet of Ben Sira, which the exact dating on that isn't, 10th century is kind of a guess. Now this legend, like the idea that Lilith is the first Eve, might predate this, but this is the oldest written record we have of Lilith as Adam's first wife. And I don't want to like dig a whole lot further into Jewish folklore, but it's clear from this that like we're talking 10th century Jewish folklore, that this is a Jewish idea, right? And the question whether or not this figure in their own mythos, in their own beliefs, is open or closed, that is up to Jewish people. That is not up to you. That is not up to me. It's also really clear that this is purely a story of Jewish origin. This is a Jewish idea. Now, you might be asking, betray! Lilith was the Babylonian goddess. She predates all of this. I read it in a witch and or New Age book at one point. Or maybe like a 50-year-old academic work. And oh boy, we got a path we got to go down here. Because she wasn't. And this is a story about how one guy's fuck up can have a domino effect, which has given me a headache on a pretty regular basis. Now, what we have to go back to is Samuel Noah Kramer's translation of the Epic of Gilgamesh, which he published in the 1930s. While translating Tablet 12, he decided to translate Ki Sakil Lil Lake as Lilith. I may have pronounced that wrong, but you get the idea. Now, besides the fact that Tablet 12 is not an original part of the Epic of Gilgamesh, and is actually an Assyrian-Akkadian translation of the latter part of the Sumerian Epic of Gilgamesh, let's take a look at what actually happens in Tablet 12. And I'm just going to read you the Wikipedia summary. And when I read this, I'm going to refer to the goddess Inanna. Inanna is better known to most people as Ishtar. That's another name for the same goddess. So that's just to give you a little context here. And this is the excerpt from Wikipedia. This is their summary. In Gilgamesh, Enkidu, and the Netherworld, a halupu tree grows in Inanna's garden in Uruk, whose wood she plans to use to build a new home. After 10 years of growth, she comes to harvest it and finds a serpent living at its base, a zoo bird raising its young in its crown, and that a Ki Sakil Lilake made a house in its trunk. Gilgamesh is said to have killed the snake, and then the zoo bird flew away to the mountains with its young, while the Ki Sakil Lilake fearfully destroys its house and runs for the forest. Now, Ki Sakil Lilake, based on its name, Ki Sakil means sacred space, and Lil can mean spirit, or it can mean owl. Lilake, that can literally mean owl. Just going back to the owl thing again. Now, it's whether that this is the, I don't think it's a bird. I think it's probably a spirit in this particular context, but spirit of demon. This is not any specific thing though. And just based on context, this is really clearly not referring to anything like the Jewish concept of Lilith, right? It's it may be, maybe you could equate it to what the original use of Lilith in Hebrew as just a general term for a demon or spirit, but it's not referring to the singular. At this point in the 20th century, when Kramer is doing this translation, Lilith has come to mean something else. Lilith has become the singular figure in folklore. And so by making this translation, by choosing this word, that's not really correct, because while the concept of the Lilithu or Lilin or Lilu would be compatible if we go with demon or spirit, because at this point the word Lilith is bound so much to the singular figure in the folklore to most people, this is a huge unintended consequence. Kramer done fucked up. Because what this really does is it conflates the concept of Jewish Lilith as something that existed in Mesopotamian mythos. It plants this seed that this singular figure, which is a much later kind of addition to Jewish folklore, we're pulling this back to a much older period than necessarily where it belongs. Right? I mean, this is like the Epic of Gilgamesh is like, we're talking like somewhere between 2100 to 1200 BCE. Tablet 12 itself is from about 600 BCE. Like, either way, like, that is so much further back than like the 10th century CE. Like, it's the conception of Lilith is so different than what the kind of spirit that was being referred to in this story. But this plants the seed, and that brings us to the Burney relief. So the Burney relief is a Babylonian relief from either the 18th or 19th century BCE, whose origin is a little cloudy. We know it's old, but it wasn't archaeologically excavated. A Syrian dealer tried to sell it to the British Museum in 1933. We know that, and they declined to buy it, and it ended up passing on to Sidney Burney. Burney, that's where it gets its name, the Burney relief, because Sidney Burney owned it. And he was a British antiques dealer, and he got it in 1935, and that's where it got its name. The relief, it's a stone relief, and it depicts a nude woman with wings and bird-like feet, and it's a pretty clear, like, it's notable because of its size and the condition that it's still in. Now, the initial theory that when this surfaced is that it depicted Ishtar, aka Inanna. But other theories were posited. In all likelihood, what the figure depicts is actually, and this is at least the more common belief. This is not a universal interpretation, but the more common belief is that it's actually Ereshkigal, Ishtar's sister and the goddess of the underworld. And that's the more common consensus. Some people still say it's Ishtar. Either way, this is either Ereshkigal or Ishtar. One of the two, most likely. But that's not the theory that really took off with a lot of people. What theory took off was that this was a depiction of Lilith. The assertion was first made by Henry Frankfurt. Frankfurt cited as a part of his reading Kramer's translation of the Epic of Gilgamesh. That's right. He thought it was Lilith because of Kramer's translation of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Now, Frankfurt also went on to say that it wasn't his idea, but he got it from Emil Kraling. And Kraling, again, cited Kramer's translation of the Epic of Gilgamesh. There is literally no other connection to actually say that this would be Lilith. Literally none. The idea that, like, they posited that it depicted some sort of demon, and because of Kramer's translations of the Epic of Gilgamesh, which brought in Lilith, again, even though this is a relief from like the 18th or 19th century BCE, the reference to the demon that Kramer actually was translating was to Tablet 12, which was actually made in 600 CE, much later than that. And again, what he was translating really doesn't translate to Lilith at all, or at least the figure that people would then describe as Lilith later on. This is where everything goes wrong. You see, Kramer's mistranslation and then the reinterpretation by Frankfurt and Kraling of the Burney relief plants this seed. And suddenly we see folks trying to retrofit Lilith into Babylonian mythology. We have this pre-existing concept of demons called Lilitu and Lilin already back up there, already in the stories. And even though they're not a singular figure, they are many figures, people start pulling that together as Lilith. And they begin to add to the concept of a singular deity. They begin to retrofit things. And I have seen some New Age sources pitch Ereshkigal mythos remapped onto the supposed goddess Lilith by some. But let's be really clear. Lilith is not a Babylonian goddess. She's not a Mesopotamian goddess at all. There is what you see in these New Age books, and I went and found 3 websites just spouting bullshit that, like, were fully unresearched within just 5 minutes of starting up planning to write this episode, because you still see this passed around, that Lilith is this Babylonian goddess. And then you see like people pull in, though, you see a bunch of Jewish folklore underneath, and it's completely remapped. They try to like say that there's this ancient idea of Lilith, but no, it's not the same thing. All right. And it's always a combination of things. There are three things out there. What we see are three things. There's the Mesopotamian idea of the Lilithu and the Lilu and like these demons that likely ended up in some form of early Jewish folklore of like this, that demons existed and they had a word similar to it that became Lilith down the line. But it's not the singular idea we get. But so like the Lilithu, this entire like Mesopotamian night spirits, shit like that. Then we get the Jewish folklore conception of Lilith, and these are the stories everybody tells after they try to justify it with the Mesopotamian stuff, the Babylonian stuff. Babylonian's easier to say. I may stick with that. Even though Babylonian really just refers to a specific period in like Sumeria and Babylonian, and like these are mythos that are intertwined, and like Mesopotamian is the better word to use because it refers to the entire region and throughout all of history instead of just singular points in history. Anyways, so we have the Mesopotamian spirits. We have the singular figure in Jewish folklore that's actually Lilith, capital L, and then we have Ereshkigal, who she got dragged into all of this because people started trying to map in Lilith into stories about Ishtar and all this other stuff, and besides taking stories that actually dealt with demons, took stuff from Ereshkigal in their new agey books. And it's just absolutely unresearched garbage. Look, because what happens is someone says, oh, I'm worshiping Lilith as a goddess. First off, Lilith isn't a goddess to anybody, right? Like, there is no goddess Lilith. That's not a thing under anybody's mythology. Because if you want to go back to, she's not a goddess in Jewish folklore. Far from it. There is no goddess Lilith in any Mesopotamian history. You have either these lower figure, of which there are multiple with a similar name, and that obviously there's an etymological link to Lilith from there, but they are a wholly different idea than what we talk about as the singular figure of Lilith, right? And then there's Ereshkigal, who she's just been dragged into all of this, and she keeps getting her mythos like slapped around and relabeled. So if you want to worship Ereshkigal, go for it. I don't think anyone is... I'm fairly certain that ancient Babylonian mythology is pretty open to people right now. And if you want to go, build the shrine to Ereshkigal, go for it. And I think she's pretty neat if you want to check her out. Inanna's probably actually a better route to go, but if Ereshkigal's an option. If you want to try to summon one of a myriad of Mesopotamian demons called Lilithu or Lilin or anything like that, sure, also. But Lilith, the singular figure, is Jewish. Right? And like any part of Jewish folklore like that, whether or not it's opened or closed is up to Jewish people and not you or me. And there are many who have said that Lilith is closed. So, with respect to them, I say, if you are non-Jewish like me, don't fucking use her. Just don't. It's so easy not to, right? Like, it's so easy not to. So, and again, under no conditions is there a goddess named Lilith. There is just, unless you're telling me that you are the personal prophet who has come down from on top of the mountain and you were spoken to by a being who has this name and is a thing, like, That's how far you have to go, because if you want to go to the historical mythology, to the stories, to the documentation we have, to the actual like texts that exist, that is not a thing that is a part of any like documented historical mythos. Now, if you want to invent something new, maybe consider not using the name from Jewish folklore, maybe it's that easy. But I need you to deeply reconsider what you're worshiping or what you're practicing, because there are many ways this road goes, and none of them make you look good. Like, it's when you go through the list of things you might be dealing with, they don't seem to be like good ideas to me. And it's super important. And I just want to be really clear that like we do our fucking homework. Don't go to witchcraft sources for this stuff. Go to academic sources. Now, this is a real challenge because, again, thanks to Kramer, there are academic sources that fuck up the Lilith stuff, right? My language is a little salty this month. Sorry. Like, Kramer's stupid mistranslation has led to, like, well, the problem is that Kramer references that, then, like, you get... So Kramer's mistranslation... being an academic, like that has that, and Frankfurt and Kraling using Kramer's translation as a justification. Then you get all these people referencing and citing Frankfurt. Mostly they cite Frankfurt, and you get this chain of citation in these academic papers. That if you go back to the original like reasoning, as you follow the trail of sources back, you find that it all goes down to Kramer mistranslating one fucking name. That's it. So, yeah. That's the situation we end up in. That is why it's impossible to say that Lilith comes from the singular figure of Lilith. Again, we're not talking about the word, which does have its roots elsewhere, but the singular figure, like that Lilith being a singular being, that there is a thing called Lilith, that comes from Jewish folklore. Exclusively. All right? Anything else is a misinterpretation, or an overt lie, or just someone being dumb, or people picking up bad books. Like, often, most of the time, misinformation gets passed around in our community because someone wrote it in a book and they fucked it up, and then someone else cited that, or someone else read that and cited that, and like it's ended up this chain of misinformation, all because, again, Kramer mistranslated Ki Sakil Lilake. Yeah. It's a mess. And now, I don't want to jump on you and yell at you for your personal gnosis. I don't want to, like, say that, like, you don't have a relationship with something that you feel that deeply to and connected to in your faith. But I want to point out that the thing called Lilith is not a goddess. So if you are dealing what you believe to be a goddess, either they are not Lilith, which is maybe they're a Reshkagel. If, just to be generous, you're doing deity work, you think you're dealing with something called, maybe it's not. Maybe it's a Reshkagel. It's gotten maybe it's not a goddess. Maybe, we've got legends about all these things called Lilith too. I'm just saying. Either way, I don't know. I'm not in your head. I'm not in your house. But I am telling you that if you are telling people that you are working with Lilith and you are not Jewish, maybe take a step back and realize that what you're doing impacts real living people. There's a real living culture that is affected by appropriating things from their mythology without their permission. And, maybe you find some Jewish person who says it's okay. I just think it's stupid because she's not a goddess. So there is no goddess Lilith. Like, it's just that exists in no one's mythology. Anyway, so that's we had to walk down that road together, and I really really think it's important that we make sure that we go to primary sources and we do our research and we question everything we read. Go look up what I told you. Go find academic sources. It's worth doing. All right, with that, I'm going to wind up this episode of BS Free Witchcraft. Remember, this show is brought to you by patrons like you supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/TRAGORN. Listeners like you help make sure this show stays on the air. And if you support the show on Patreon, you do get access to these episodes a week early. This one came out pretty close to the line. I'm saying that not having put it out yet because usually I have it out by now and I'm still recording, but technically I haven't. It's still more than a week before it comes out, so we're good. And I want to give a shout out to some of my patrons who contribute at the shout out level. So Stephanie Graves, Mary Stoll, Lindsay Dosey, Bruce Norville, Courtney, Amber Schmidt, Isabella Guerra, An Echo of Truth, and Kaichi. Hopefully I said all of those right. Remember, you can, if you can't afford to contribute to the Patreon, I understand. Just share the show with all your friends. Tell them about how great it is and how smart I am. No, I don't know. Remember, you can follow the show on social media. I'm on TikTok at TRAEGORN. I'm trying to update there again. We'll see how that goes. On Tumblr, TRAEGORN.tumblr.com. You can find me on Twitter at twitter.com/TRAEGORN. You can follow the show on Facebook at facebook.com/BSFreeWitchcraft. And I'm going to remind people, I do not accept friend requests on Facebook. If you find my personal Facebook page, that's where I talk to my mom, okay? Just, if you want to talk to me, though, directly, the best way to do that is to join our Discord. The Nerd and Tie Podcast Network that this show is a part of has a Discord, and you can find an invite for that at nerdandtie.com/Discord. And, also we've got a great witchcraft community on there because it's also the Discord for Hex Positive, our sibling podcast hosted by Brina Guerin. And Bree every month, Bree's taking a little break right now for many reasons, including getting COVID a second time, but show's still updating on its regular schedule. Just the bonus content is delayed. But you can find her show at nerdandtie.com/hex. And Bree's great. She's a secular witch, so while I'm a Wiccan, she's a secular witch. She's also the author of Grove Daughter Witchery. She's got a lot of really great research. She's awesome. So definitely check out her podcast, also on the Nerd and Tie Podcast Network. So nerdandtie.com/hex. And with that, Magicians, I am going to run away. Remember, don't be afraid to fight a god. Don't be a chicken, be a magician. And I will talk to you all next month, probably with that depressing topic, or if I get distracted by something else shiny, whatever that is. It's that episode of research will happen down the road. I have a script. It'll happen. I just don't want to do it yet. I don't know why. I just don't want to do it. But I'll do it. We did this one first.